very pitiful technological skills, and I'm going to share the screen with you in a second. But oh, feel free. I won't send this deck out, but feel free to take any screenshots that you wish. That's not a problem. And I'll start out by saying, the number one reason listings don't sell is I really believe it's priced incorrectly to begin with. And oftentimes the reason that the price is set incorrectly is a lot of poor questions by you and not listening to the answers. Because I think you have to understand their expectations and their whys in order to get them where they need to be in order to get to their goals, right? And it really does start initially with asking the right questions and listening, because today's buyers, they're more seemingly more informed, but they're also more impatient. They're more interest rate sensitive. They're paying attention to market conditions, and you need to be asking the questions and pulling out from them what their real weaknesses are and their fears. And when you are able to do that at a high level, you're going to be able to get the right answers, and then most importantly, listen and write it down and know your audience. I think we don't have time to get too deep into this, but if you haven't taken some classes or listened to, even in, I think Our Place has some of this information. If you haven't studied personality and personality types and how people learn, whether they're auditory or a visual learner, if you haven't exposed yourself to that, I would also recommend that you do that, because knowing your audience when you're sitting down with a seller is critical, right? You have to know where that information is going to land, and you have to know that personality. And oftentimes, those of us that are experienced know that sometimes in one household, there can be two very different personalities. So depending on how you talk, same information, but presented in a different way. We know that pricing observations are kind of a science, right? But forecasting the speed or the direction that the market is going in, that is an art. And when you put that science and that art together, that becomes your strategy, right? And we're going to talk a little bit more about strategy and what exactly that means. And then we're going to cover what I call the price framework, PRICE. I like to use that to kind of help you remember. We're going to cover that framework. We're going to do some active role playing. If we have time, we're going to try to fit all this in. And then I'm going to leave you with some just snippets of dialogues, because I believe you learn these snippets instead of learning an entire paragraph on an objection handler. You learn little snippets or little bullets, and those little bullets become your tools. And then you have to reach into those tools, often not in the order that you memorize them in. And this is where people get stuck in their scripting, is they memorize their paragraph in a certain format, and they haven't solidified it enough in their minds to be able to go out of order, and you get hung up on that. I see it all the time when we're doing our practicing. So I want to reframe that for you and have you learn these things in bullets that you can pull out in any order. Do you follow what I mean? Like my brother has 7 children, and I can't say all their names unless I start from the oldest to go to the youngest. Like I can't, kind of like your ABCD, you can't kind of start in the middle or go backwards, because we learned it a certain way. And I want you to, off the bat, start learning these scripts, any scripts really is my recommendation, by bullets and not full sentences, so that you can use them a little bit. Just try it, and I promise you'll get some good results for that. Okay, so let's go ahead and move. I'm going to share this screen, hopefully, with no. Tell me if you're seeing something that says the price framework. Is anybody seeing?
Yes, we see it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I can't see what you're seeing exactly, so just want to make sure. Okay. P, and again, you can take screenshots of this if you'd like. Of course, we start, and I'm just starting with the basics because I know everybody's at different spots, but it never hurts to always go back to your foundational pieces. Pulling accurate comps, and we really call them relevant market analysis, an RMA instead of a CMA. And why do we do things like that? Sometimes it really doesn't mean much different than a CMA, but it sticks out in people's minds. And part of what your job is for people to remember who you are, particularly if they're interviewing several people in a listing appointment, right? So I like to call it an RMA, a relevant market analysis. We know we've got to pull accurate properties, right? We kind of call that a qualified macro where your search may be really broad at first. You may take an entire neighborhood, or if it's too small, you may take a radius around a subject property. So we're going to start macro, and I start 90 days, but sometimes I have to go further out. Again, it's not an exact relevant property to yours. You're just casting a wide net to get an overall idea of what's happening. And you're going to go through those properties in these micro categories if it has to have a pool, if the lot's a specific size. Even age can be a factor, but I'm going to show you that you don't want to rule that out if you're in a neighborhood where maybe you have old and new. A home can be completely 50 years old and renovated 6 months ago, right? So we kind of know those things. I see people constantly making the mistake of getting their initial pool wrong. They automatically narrow it so much because they're wanting to get to a number like a manageable number, 30 properties. And I'm telling you, you might start with 50 or 60, and you're going to have to go through each one of those properties in order to pull out the ones that apply to you or not. Right. Because we know behind the door, it's kind of like Price is Right. You never know what's behind the door, right? And you've got to sometimes see the property first, or sometimes rule some things out that on paper look right, like a 3 bedroom to a 3 bedroom. But then you find out that that third bedroom was really, so small and didn't have a closet. Like, you've got to dig into the information. And that's what that middle bullet is about: interviewing listing and should be listing and buyer's agents to pick up the phone and talk to the people that are in that sold representation, those properties that sold, the buyer's agent and the listing agent, and find out about that property. You may find out a motivation that one of the two had that made them pay more or take less. You may find out that it was a friend and there was absolutely no, or family member, and there wasn't a commission charge that changes the net. Depending on your MLS, you may be able to go into your MLS and find out it had been listed 2 or 3 times before unsuccessfully. Maybe not. You might have to ask the agent. There's so much information to be gathered by speaking to the other agent about how many showings they had, what happened with price reductions. All of that is important, and I put that in a comment section, and I'm going to show you what that looks like in a minute. We pull it into a spreadsheet so that you can put in your comments and your notes. And if an agent does tell you something, I put it in parentheses so they know it's a quote from that person directly involved in the transaction. You're also going to want to look between price points and price per foot. Oftentimes, particularly on higher end properties, price per foot doesn't take into account things like views, or if there's a street right behind it, or you could use all of the acre lot versus you could only use a portion of it because the rest of it is topographically impossible to access. All of those things could affect your price per foot and not show up as value. So you want to look at the price that's moving and the price per foot. And we do that in something called price banding, which I'll also show you I'm going to pull up our MLS here in a second. You know how to figure out absorption rates, correct? Right? If 10 houses sold in 30 days and you've got 30 houses, that's 3 months of inventory, right? We know how to calculate that, but you might need to explain that to your client, because all of these perspectives, price banding, the interviews of agents, price per foot versus price point, your absorption rate. Even if if you know a property's coming back on that was expired and withdrawn, that'll change supply, right? You're going to find that out because you're going to call that agent. You're going to call the agent of the expired or withdrawn property. Are you relisting? That can change your supply. Specifically right now, because there's a lot of properties that didn't sell 6 months ago, a year and a half ago in our shifted market, and they will be coming back. That could double your supply easily. Again, you'll know that because you're asking the agent, you're interviewing the agent. And you're also, another perspective is quarterly velocity. You can look at a year's sale at a time and determine, is October and November a hot month because you see a lot of closings in December that went under contract in October, November, right? We know how to backwards out how many days it takes for something to close. So we can see what quarters or even what month things are more likely to go under contract. That becomes really important this time of the year when you may have some sellers whose properties they have not sold. Maybe August is dead, but September and October are busy. So now's the time to get that price reduction so you don't miss that little window, right? So all of these bullets that you see here, these are all perspectives. And when you look at all these perspectives, what you're hoping for is that they're all pointing in some kind of a range, right? You know, that's gonna feed our analytical brain, that all these different perspectives, whether it's the interviews or the quarterly velocity or the price per foot, are all kind of heading to some type of a price point where you likely have a cap and you likely have a bottom, and you're going to be in that range somewhat. And where you're going to swing in that range might depend on that visit, because we know we get these calls and sometimes we haven't been in the house, right? So you have to know all this has to be solidified in your head. You might even have a little cheat sheet. I always have a little thing of notes. I use that's the older days. Now I use a Remarkable, but I always have my little notes in here that tell me the outcome of all of these different perspectives. So when I'm building my conversation with the seller, I have it all written down, my rationale of what price bending meant to me, what quarterly velocity meant to me relative to this property. I have all of my rationale written down, and I also have created a choreography, so to speak, in the order that I'm going to present it. The order I'm going to present it to them, either in the hard presentation that, you know, I'm handing them, the order that is in. We print out our listing books from PowerPoint. They're not pre-bound, so I can pull sheets out if they don't apply to this client. Higher price points might get some things and lower price points might get other things. I'm not going to do the same marketing because it's not required at every price point, right? So when I present that book to them, I'm going to have this rationale, all of these bullets that apply to where I know this pricing needs to be, that apply to that range in order, and I'm going to have a list and know exactly how I'm going to explain it to them. It takes preparation, right? When you go to R stands for Realistic Seller Conversations. Because I believe that you have to start setting the expectations at the listing presentation, particularly now more than ever, when we know sometimes a home is priced properly, it's presented properly, you're doing your job showing it and marketing it properly, and it's still not selling. And that this is just our world right now. This is a very different class if we were talking a couple of years ago, right? In a couple of years ago, when the market was escalating, you had to forecast to the future, right? Here we're forecasting to the future again, but the numbers are either flat. In some markets they're soft, in a few markets they're going up, but a very moderate rate. So you've got to set those expectations during the listing presentation and ask your client, you know, how are we going to define our strategy? Are we trying to secure the best price now or in this foreseeable future? And this is going to go back to their why, because it's also a strategic question. of the value of the property relative to the market that that property happens to be in. Because if your city's anything like Austin, we have 100 micro markets. Just in the 5 mile radius around, this is my home office, the 5 mile radius around my home office, we're going to have a couple of micro markets. So the strategic question is, how does this subject property compete relative to the market conditions, not necessarily just the value of the home? And that's where you can get some of the heat taken off of you, because you're not telling them that their baby is ugly. Like it really isn't a discussion about the kitchen. That's one part of it, right? When you're doing your macro pricing, that can be one part of it, but it's how the home is showing up in the marketplace, right? We're going to talk about days on market. I like to say dollars lost. Your days on market are your dollars lost, right? And we're going to see how the home fits relative to the days on market, the speed and the direction that micro market is going in. We're going to talk to them about the pricing triangle, which is price, activity, and time. And once you've had those three components show up, because your listing has been on the market for a week or two, what is the activity? How much time is it taking to get the appropriate number of people through? We know if there's not a lot of traffic at the beginning, we have to already have a conversation teed up and ready, because we set the expectation during the listing presentation that we're going to have this conversation. I don't mind taking a property that's maybe $50,000, let's say on a $1.5 million property, $50,000 too high, 3 to 5% too high. If I know, because I know I'm good at pre-framing reductions as part of the strategy, and not having to go to pedal backwards and go, oh, we made a mistake, we overpriced, we failed. We're already saying we're going to have this conversation if, after that triangle shows up, we've marketed our price, we have had activity or not enough activity, and enough time has passed. And you're going to know how much time based on how quickly other properties went under contract, because you're going to have, again, the conversations with those agents, and you're going to know from those conversations, they had 3 people through a week, they had 1 person through a week, it took 2 weeks to get good traffic. So you, again, are setting your property in the seller's expectation relative to that micro market, right? Then you can go in and have the discussion, because you've already pre-framed. If we get to 3 weeks, based on the conversations with other agents, we should see an offer by then. And if we get to that point and we haven't had the average number of showings that all these other competitors had when they were successful at going under contract, we're going to have to talk about this reduction. Some people go so far as getting a price reduction document signed in advance. I don't typically do that, but I know a lot of people do. And if you've been in this business long enough and you've been through shifts, like I went through 9/11 and also 2008, 9, 10, you can use some stories. And if you don't have that, borrow a story from someone on your team. Stories like, I still remember the first house that in the shift that wouldn't listen to my price reduction. And when they got an offer, the gap was too wide to bridge. And a year later, they ended up selling their house for less than that original initial offer was in a year earlier. That's a true story. So I'll use that story, and other people on my team use that story. Use your own stories if you have them. But I think a lot of people want to hear what really happened or what you would do. And you should be confident in your ideas to them. If you would cut your price now to prepare for the showing traffic that's going to happen come September, then you should tell them that. You should have enough confidence in your convictions to say, this is what I would do. And if you don't, I'm going to challenge you to go back to the items in that P, and revisit them. In fact, you should be revisiting them all the time because you should be constantly having conversations with your clients. Your clients are going to be influenced by market momentum that is around him. This is the I, and you need to influence what they're hearing. They have a certain fear psychology that takes them over in a market like this. They see other signs that are still up. If they're attached to any auto search, they probably get price reductions, price reductions, price reductions in their email every day. That's making them scared. They may be hearing from neighbors. They need to hear from you. They need to hear what the buyer sentiments are, what other agents are saying. They need to understand how the days on market are moving and if interest rates are really going to influence buyer behavior. You know, you might hear that from people. I'm waiting to list until interest rates come down. I'm waiting, buyer might say, I'm waiting to buy when interest rates come down. Do the math for them. We have mortgage calculators. In 1 minute, you can show them what it really will look like for an $800,000 house with 20% down in a quarter point difference. It's almost nothing. Depending on the price of the house at the end of the year, it's less than $10,000. In the meantime, other buyers are going to come in or other listings are going to come in and the competition is going to change. So be good at doing the math for the client and giving them real information and not what they're seeing or hearing from unqualified sources or, God forbid, the news, right? And of course, see condition and curb appeal. Not only do you need to school them on this, but also relevant to the competition. Sometimes I put a seller in my car and I take them out to see what I think is likely going to be on the list for that buyer to see when they're including our homes in their tour. We put together our own tour and I take them out, particularly people who maybe aren't really getting with the program on staging or decluttering or doing even minor repairs. You might have to coach them on what the return on their investment will be if they paint. You may have to show them before or after pictures on staging. Whatever it takes to get them to understand where they're going to show up against the competition, you want and need to do that. And you want to be very prepared for your evidence over emotion, because you want to show them what the market is proving and not what they are hoping. The pricing has to match the reality and not just what the seller wants. And the best way to do that is showing them this hyperlocal data, the market reports. If you have reverse prospecting in your MLSs, use that reverse prospecting. Show them how many people are actually matching up to their criteria. Explain the list to sell price ratio. If it's tight, then they can stand to be tight in negotiations. If it's broad, you need to prepare them for that and perhaps leave a little meat on the bone in your price reduction, because you know that it's an area that usually experiences heavy negotiating, right? Give them the feedback from other brokers. Go back to those data bullets in the P section and review those. We always send out, and actually I'm gonna stop share this for just a second and see if I can pull something up real quickly for you. I should have had it ready, so I'm sorry. I'm gonna show you our price spreadsheet. Here we go. And I'm gonna send you, let me pull this back here and share it with you guys. I'm going to send to you, where'd you all go? Your pretty little faces. Okay, here we are. This shell, so that you can use this if you choose. Tell me when you see that spreadsheet. Yes, thumbs up, anyone?
Got it.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I'm gonna send you this shell, but I just wanted to show you a couple of things. For those of you, I don't know what all MLSs you have, but our MLS stops about here where it says original that, like when you do a quick CMA, If you all have that, we have that button in our MLS, believe it or not. Quick CMA. And I always say sellers don't give a flip if doing their CMA was quick. They want it to be right, right? The whole idea that that is even an option blows my mind. But we don't use the quick CMA for a reason. But I might hold up a quick CMA example that again is really this whole area. Oh, wait, what just happened? It's this whole area and none of this information to the other side of that blue line. This you're going to have to go in and get manually. The original price point. Our MLS shows our original price point, but it doesn't show the number of reductions. You got to go into the history, pull out the number of reductions. Of course, get the price per foot, right? Of the latest, the current price per foot. But when you get down to the solds, you may show there were 3 reductions. This was the price that the property had to be at in order to go under contract, right? And then this is the price that it's sold at, this column here. And this is going to be the original, from the original price in this column, the original price in this column, to the entire reduction, 23%. Do you see what I mean? You see with this guy, if this is one reduction, 3%. From one price to the price that got attractive enough to get an offer. But this was the entire reduction, 23.85%. That tells a very, very different story. And your client needs to see that on average, see this column down here at the bottom, on average, there were 2 reductions. On average, 6% from the last reduction, and in total 14% from the original price to the last reduction. That's really different than if you just show them a 6% reduction. Do you follow me? And this is why you have to do the work for these additional columns. So we export all this data into a spreadsheet, and then we manually pull this information. We also leave at the bottom properties we removed from our original macro search. They're not in our computations. I don't average them at all because they don't mean anything to us from a numbers standpoint, except for the supply. So I'm still going to show, we've got 5 other properties in this neighborhood, but I pulled them out and I'll say what reason. Like this property was 11,000 square feet. See how it's highlighted, that 11,000? That's my cheat sheet to say I removed 12,900 Hacienda Ridge because it's a 2022. That's why I highlighted in yellow to remember, for my old brain to remember why. I could also type it in here. It's too new for the subject property. This was too large for the subject property. But you'll also see these details. See this detail with parentheses? That's because the agent actually said those words. My listing is old, boring, and needs an overhaul. It's $1 million too high. Do you see the kind of information you get from these other agents? This is important. This section here, this is gold, this section. Now, when I'm doing this, I have my VA enter all this information, the agent's information, their phone number, their email, and I even have a link to the property. So I'm looking back and forth. I don't have to also open the MLS, right? But when I send this live link, I'm going to copy and paste this live link, and I'm going to send it to my client. But I'm not going to have the listing agent's phone. I'm going to make a copy of this and I'm going to send to my client everything else but the listing agent's info, including the comments, including the section. And I'm going to tell my client, star this link in your email, because as new properties are coming on and they need to be added to the active column, we're going to add it in real time as it's happening. If I see an active property that matches this, I'm sending it to my assistant and telling them to add it, and they have to redo the computations. Like, I'm not going to deal with that. I don't deal with math. But if it's new, then for my client's sake, I'm going to highlight this so they know to look for the yellow. And I'll remind them in your spreadsheet, look for anything that's yellow. That is the change. If this property that's been active, they changed the price, then that's going to be highlighted in yellow. Seller, look for the yellow highlight. That is what changed. That way they're not looking all over this page wondering, well, what changed? I don't know what the heck changed. Help them. Make it easy for them. And let them read everything that these agents are saying. Right here, it's brutal out there. There's so much inventory between there and Barton Creek. That's what the agents tell me. Let your client see that. Do you have any questions on this before we get off of it? Again, I'm going to send you this. I'm going to send this to you so that you can use it. And obviously you have to know how to change your formulas, right? But other than that, back to like the macro perspective on pricing, we know that you either price it at the market, you price low to attract big bidders, or you price higher. I call it a floated price with a pre-agreed price reduction plan. I mean, those are just obviously those are your options: at market, above market, or under market. And really the why from those initial questions that you listened to and wrote down answers, because your brain is just like everybody else's. You're not going to remember. Write it down. It's so good to reflect back on something that your client told you 7 or 8 months earlier. And for some of these listings, it's taken that long. So take good notes. But you're going to hear your client is usually going to show their cards on what's important to them. You know, they may slip and say, oh, we need this to pay for our upgrades. Okay, you know that they've got that monkey on their back. Or let's try it high for a little bit and then reduce it. Okay, I'm going to write that down. That's what they said. Or they may think you need to overprice to leave room to negotiate. Well, if you did a spreadsheet like I just showed you, you might see it's only 3 or 4 or 5%, right? Data driven. But you're going to hear a lot of those, what I call pricing traps and pricing pitfalls. And in that package, oh, let me see if
That was awesome.
Jeanette, quick question for you.
Uh-huh.
So with that spreadsheet, like, you talked about personality types,
Yeah.
like high D, like personality that like, I just give me the quick overview. Like, how do you present that spreadsheet to someone who might look at that and say, like, this is way too much?
Well, it is a lot. I mean, number one, it is a lot. I wish I had an example of one, but this is what I do for them because it's a lot of numbers. I mean,
Hmm.
and I put it out on the biggest sheet possible because I want to hold up the little 8.5 by 11 quick CMA that the other people do. And then I literally unroll my sheet. Just the size of it says, oh, they've done more work, right? But it can be a lot. So I might highlight in blue, like the first thing I want them to look at. And then in yellow, the second thing I want them to look at, or just number it and circle it. And I tell them, this is a lot of it. You can usually, like somebody's going, oh my God, what am I looking at? And somebody else is all over it, right? I mean, most couples aren't exactly alike. And so you just have to hone in on the person that you think at that moment is the likely person to absorb that information. And maybe you switch different data like staging or decluttering to another person. Like you have to have some intuition. But a high D person, I'm a high D, so I just want the information. I have a hat that says less words. Like if I was really brave, I'd tattoo it on my arm and just go around doing this to because everybody uses too many stinking words. Nobody cares. And I think a lot of times we grab words to buy us time to think about what we really want to say. Get on with it. And this is why you need to have it memorized. and you need to practice it and record it into your phone and listen back to it when you're, sitting there waiting for the doctor, or, the 5 minutes you can grab here, there, and everywhere, grab it. At the end of the day, I promise you, you're going to find an hour and a half easy that you can be listening to all the mistakes you made, because the way you hear it in your brain and the way it comes out to the recipient, I promise you they're different. And you need to hear yourself. And so go through, that's a great, Zach, that's great. I'm going to write that down. See, we all learn when we do these classes, because I'm going to start telling people, record yourself for a D, record yourself for an I, record yourself for an F. Like it's not going to be 95% of it's the same. It might be the pace, or you might pull out a couple of things. It's just the 5% that you might have to twist and turn. And you'll figure that out, because we all have our own style, right?
Yeah. And I like that you said you highlight the stuff beforehand. So you're,
Yeah, but move them. And also for me too, because again, like, I'm the queen of the cheat sheet. Everything is written down in here. If you think I can remember any of this, you're crazy, because we just have so much in our brains, and so do they. So help them. Step one, we're gonna, there's a lot of numbers here. I want you to follow along with me. I've put this together in a specific order, and in the way that you're going to get that information. The flow of it is important. So stay with me. Step one, and you can see their eyes. There you go. This is also why I don't hand them a listing presentation book. I flip the page for them. Otherwise, they're not listening to you. They're reading what's at the bottom of the page. So make them move with them. If it's a complicated property, I might have 3 or 4 spreadsheets like that. Like if it's on acreage, we may just be looking at acreage in one perspective. If it's a modern house surrounded by traditional homes, we may just be looking at modern houses throughout the city. Like I don't do, now there's more modern, but there was a day where there weren't a lot of moderns. And when you had to price those, you had, it was different. So don't be afraid to do multiple perspectives. Just as you're pulling things out, write down why. You won't remember, leave those breadcrumbs, put them in the right order, choreograph it, listen to yourself. Okay, thank you for the questions. And I do see Sabrina, thank you, posted it's at 8:47 in the chat. Click here for pricing resources. If you open that up, you'll see some documents like the pricing pitfalls and some responses, because we're not going to have really time to do scripting. And you'll also see a whole list of real estate tie downs. And you'll see 5 key components to getting that price reduction in advance. So take a look at all of that, and you'll see that template for that pricing if you'd like to try that. And feel free to create your own. I mean, obviously that's just an example. There might be things in your area that are important, and it's possible this another thing I put sometimes on this sheet is if you are comping some properties off market. We have a lot of that in our market. I might have a column that says off market, so that's an example. You can make it as customized as you want. Okay, have you all read the book What to Say, or no, what is it? How to Say to Realtors?
Exactly what to say.
Yeah, thank you. Exactly. I usually have it here on my desk, but I was reading in the other room. Exactly what to say for real estate agents. Have you all picked that book up? So pick that book. I mean, listen to it on Audible. I listen to a book on Audible, and if I really think it's meaty, then I'll buy the book, because I write in my books and reflect on it all the time. But in that book, there's a section he calls them magic words. And there's a whole section. The book is very well structured, because in the back, he has things in a chart, and he has his list of magic words. And I want to encourage you all, for whatever your typical dialogue is with your sellers on pricing, to weave in those magic words. Like, can you imagine, is one that I like to use a lot because it does make people visualize. If you're like most people, because most people want to be like most people, right? That gets them to move along into what you're going to say after if you're like most people. But there's a whole list of magic words. And I think if you feel like you've got, kind of your dialogue down, I encourage you to amp it up by weaving those magic words in to your dialogue and including the tie downs. So again, there's a list of real estate tie downs that I sent to you all in that free link. So practice that. Even if you are a grandmaster blaster on your listing presentations and you feel like your pricing strategy is pretty good, I encourage you to record it for yourself and listen with the challenge of adding those two components. Usually when people record themselves and listen back, they're mortified. They think they're really clear on a point. And it's really clear because when you're to yourself, because when you're saying it, your brain also has in its filing cabinet all the context around it. So it makes complete sense to you because you're not living just in that sentence. You're a product of everything that went into that sentence. But your people have not had that benefit. They're not in your brain. They are only listening to that sentence. And you likely have not provided enough context to get their buy-in and to trust what you're saying. That's where you have to walk them through it. Do you follow me? And you have to check in with them as you're going along. If I'm saying if I'm going back to that pricing matrix and I'm explaining why I took a neighbor's house out, they're like, oh, I don't see 123 Main Street in your actives. I'm like, well, I got you there because down here at the bottom, here it is. That's like the worst feeling when you're in a listing presentation and the seller says, what about my neighbor's house that sold behind me? And you're like, what is that? You better have that house there. That's the purpose of the macro. Even if it was twice as big, they think it's a comparable property to theirs, right? So you need to go into the comments and say, hey, we took out your neighbor behind you because they're twice the size, or the lot's twice the size, or they completely gutted the house to the stuff, or whatever is in your comments because you did the homework. And you can leave. Now you're building trust instead of them going, I don't know if Doty's got it together because she didn't have my neighbor's house behind me. Now that's a strike against her, as opposed to being prepared. I think all pricing anxiety goes out the window with preparation. If you can prove it to yourself and prove it in steps that someone else can follow, you can prove it to the buyer's agent, the buyer, and possibly the appraiser, because your price has to be defensible. You have to be able to go to war with that number. And that's going to come by all of those breadcrumbs that you've made notes on why you included something and why you didn't. And if you are educating your seller along the way, if you did all that work in the forefront, if in your conversation, in that member that are the realistic seller expectations, if you're setting the expectation on the flow of traffic, the velocity of traffic, when we're likely to see it, how many people, based on what happened with all the successful relevant sales, how many people need to go through on average to get a reduction. If you're sharing all that in the beginning, setting the expectation, revisiting it each week, I think you should be having 2 touches with your seller every single week. One needs to be out of your mouth and not like this. They want to hear from you. You didn't get the appointment in a text message. What makes you think you're going to keep their business that way? What are you thinking? It's not about what's easy for you. It's about them. So no matter the conversation, figure out one way a week to say it verbally. Even if you leave a message and you don't actually speak to them. And don't cheat and try to call them when you know they're probably not available. I mean, the goal is to try to speak to them, but don't beat yourself up or call back again and again until you get, and that's weird, right? Just leave the message, but leave it something important. Hey, Mr. Seller, I just wanted to let you know that I was at a property tour and talking to people. And it sounds like there's some buyers that are preparing to fly in September, and I know it's just the end of July, but some of those changes that we talked about on your house, it might be time to take those on so we can be prepared for that traffic. Like something meaningful. And then the other touch can be something that you can send to them. If you're doing that and you're staying in communication with them, and every interaction they're seeing that you're going out of your way and not just adding 1 + 1 = 2. I mean, any numbnut can do that. It's not about multiplication. I mean, you're trying to make a lot of money. Do your job and focus on these numbers all the time. I think for every listing you have, you personally, and I'm saying there's somebody else doing everything else. If you're on a team, I know there's some great teams represented here. They're Ronce and Ben Kinney Austin. You have tons of support. Even with all of that support, you personally should be looking at that listing and working on it a minimum of 2 hours a week. And if new listings have come on, you need to go out. I was just doing something with somebody and on pricing, and it was a very unique property in that it had no garage. And everything else in that neighborhood had a garage. But there was an active property, the same number of bedrooms, a set of 3, 2, no half bath, no garage, similar size. And they hadn't seen it, and it had been on the market longer than they had been listed. I'm like, how the heck did you get to this point? And you haven't seen this property that is just like your house. And you actually priced your house with this property on the market and you never walked through it. What are you doing? You're dealing with people's money. It's 2 streets over from your subject property. You didn't have 5 minutes to walk through it. That is not doing your job. So 2 hours, you should be looking at what's on the market, looking at what's moved, making additional phone calls. There will be agents who have a new listing, call them. Make friends with them. Goodwill, the goodwill that you create in speaking with other agents and helping them when they help you. I never end a call with another agent without saying, what is it that I can do for you? How can I help you today? I do a lot of appointment with agents because my price point is higher. So the agent is with the client, right? And I almost never let someone leave, even if I have to cross my fingers because I'm saying a white lie. But I always say to the client, to the buyer, you've already made a great first choice because your agent's incredible. You're in the right hands with this agent. Even if I think the agent is crazy and I don't like that, I'm going to say that. I'll go to confession before church Sunday, but I'm going to say that because goodwill does not show up in your pricing column. It's not in anyone's spreadsheet. You can't crunch that number, but I'm telling you that value pays big time. Big time. People like to work with you if they like you. And if they don't like you, they don't want to work with you. And guess what happens? They don't show your house, or they're more likely to push the client to another property. It happens every day because we're human beings, and that is the way people work. So if you can walk away with doing anything today, if you walk away from this, walk away with pick up the phone. I never get these phone calls. That's how come I know people don't do it. But I call, and everybody on my team knows, we call people all the time. We learn so much from doing that. Right? Does anybody have any questions? Or have a pricing obstacle that they want to mastermind around?
I do, Jeanette. Again, so like price reduction, because I know you have mentioned a little bit of price reduction. How do you like when your price reduction recommendation is not where where they want to be? What are some scripts, tie downs, whatever you might utilize to help bring them to your recommendation? And how far do you push on that?
Well, first off, you have to have your data that you've been, really believe if you have hard data and they're more than 3 or 5% too high. First, I'll say sometimes saying no is the right answer to them. You know, that adage, it's great. It's better to be the firstborn, the second wife, and the third realtor. A lot of times I'll tell people that sometimes it's better to be the third realtor because it can take a while for a seller to go through the stages of grief and get out of denial and get into acceptance. And I say all of that in almost every listing presentation before we even talk about the price. I'm already preparing them, for that. But like I said earlier, if it's 3 or 5% higher, I don't have an issue taking that listing if it's that close, as long as I'm setting the expectation. So I might tell them, I don't have an issue pricing a little bit higher because honestly, between us, it just takes one person, right? I mean, somebody can be willing to pay that price. I don't want to take that money off out of their pocket, but I'll tell them based on my conversations with other agents, we can see here, now I'm going to point to the data, that it took them 30 to 35 showings to get an offer, or 5 to 10 to get an offer. And they were able to do that on average days on market in 45 days. If we get, can you agree with me that if we get to 2 weeks in and we haven't seen the same amount of traffic that all of your competitors are seeing and all of the successful sellers experienced, can we agree that at that 2 week mark, we're going to have to make an adjustment to the price that I have been able to substantiate based on, and then here's your bullets that you've pulled out based on the velocity of sales. And remember, that's this month, we're more likely to get a buyer than the following month. We have a short window. Again, this is important this time of year because September and October, you're likely to get something under contract, not so much in November and December, at least in our market, right? So you have to know your market. But at that juncture of the conversation, based on, and then you're going to pull out your bullets, your velocity, your conversations, your days on market, price, whatever your tools are that work, bam, 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 bam. Are we in agreement? You got to get them to say yes.
Got it. I love that. I think you're planting that seed, getting the agreement at the first meeting, so that when you bring it up week 2 or 3, it's not crazy to refer back to that conversation.
No, that's why it should be. I mean, I'm trusting that you all are savvy enough to not be weird, and talk about it every single time you talk to them. But you have to have some gut, of when you can weave it properly into a conversation. And if indeed people are reducing around them, right? That's the other part of the conversation is if people are reducing around you, they're going to see it in that spreadsheet and you're highlighting that change. They see a price reduction, they see another price reduction. I'll even say, go to your live link. There's been another price reduction. That's the third one this week. Then you're going to be able, to explain to them the longer we wait, the more that your property is going to be stale. And when buyers see a home that's not getting any action relative to their micro market, they're going to wonder what the heck is wrong. So the price is the problem, but also the price is the solution. So let's get to the solution.
Love that. Thank you for that.
That was
Yeah,
amazing.
Elizabeth, that template is in the link. If you scroll up to um 904, you'll see the link that says, I guess maybe, could I copy it? I don't know how this works. Can somebody copy that and put it at the bottom? So people aren't having to look, but the link says pricing resources in the template. Elizabeth is in there. Yeah.
Really quick, Jeanette, and I know this might be for a whole other class, and this has been amazing. And I know I love taking it back to the data because data never lies. And the way you've got your spreadsheet lined up, I think that's incredible. So thank you for this.
You're welcome.
You mentioned stale, and as we see more and more properties go on the market, at least in our market, and also price reductions and some homes just sitting it's in that higher end. How, when a property is stale, what are some of the things that you like? One, two, three bullet points. What do you do in that situation to either relaunch or get it to back to market other than price, right?
Mhm.
And price is a big piece of it, we know, but what do you do?
We regularly change the photo order. Um, sometimes there's like we have a listing on Enfield right now, and the Enfield's a busy street, but the first photo shows the courtyard. I'm not going to change that first photo because when people see busy and I need them to see courtyard at the same time, but typically I'll change the order of things. People might really be drawn to the kitchen. So that might be the lead photo or the front photo or the back photo or the evening shot or the pool. Same thing, and particularly with like Chat GPT, where our person who writes our copy or our copywriter will do it one way. I'm not going to pay someone to continue to rewrite stuff. So I'm just going to cut and paste it and put it into Chat GPT and obviously check it because they can be wrong and put the verbiage in a different order.
I love that you say that, and it's kind of like with Brevity Recruiter, how they ask us to refresh it X amount of times. I think that's something that I believe we need to start doing with all of our listings is starting to refresh it by changing the order, changing the photo, and doing a few things like that. So
And sometimes
as
you
you're
have,
getting to new markets.
if you're dealing with sellers right now and here it is about to be August and you're like, this is not moving. This house, it hasn't moved in 6 months. It's probably not going to move in August. I would be sitting them down right now and saying, we've got to be relentless at what we can control. And we can't control what everybody else is doing. We can control my activity and my efforts. And if you've been communicating with them, they're not going to be disappointed in that. They're going to know. Many times the seller doesn't even know what you're doing because you're doing a bad job in letting them know. But we've got to be relentless in what we can control. You can't be disappointed in my activity or my efforts because look at, they've known you, they're hearing from you constantly. They see all the work. But maybe we do need to go ahead and paint that blue room. Or maybe we should take it off the market for 2 weeks and give you time to put in the hardwoods or declutter. Can we talk about staging and use this time of the year to do that? And that way, when you relaunch, you're going to have new photos, right? Sometimes, even if they're not changing a whole lot, a different photographer can see something in a different way. And it might be worth a couple $100 investment to reshoot it. I mean, after all, isn't that what other agents do when they take over the listing? I mean, how many times have you seen a second or third agent take over a listing and it goes under contract right away and nothing really is that different? And you're just like, I want to punch myself in the face. So just take new photos yourself and relaunch it.
That's really good. Thank you, Jeanette.
You're welcome. I'm going to be respectful of your time because the 30 minutes, I asked for an hour, so it's an hour. Feel free to reach out to me anytime that here, I think I've got, well, this is my other son in it, but I'm just going to put this up for a second so you can get my phone number. Do you see that down there? Am I showing up yet? My phone number and my email's at the bottom. Feel free to call or email me anytime. And I wrote a book on exit strategies. Some people are finding it helpful in recruiting. That's what that QR code is, to take you to that website. There's also a ton of other free stuff on that website that you all can just download and look at. So you're welcome to all of that as well. I'll stop share, but feel free to call if you want to just role play something on a reduction, or, you know, it's all practice, right? I don't have every answer, but, you know, in the beginning of my career, I just outworked everybody, but we didn't have the support that you all have now. So, you know, keep going to our place and listening. If you're not blocking out like 2 hours a week just to rummage around our place and listen and take notes, you're crazy. Like, what are you doing? It's like you have the Library of Congress. You're in the middle of the Library of Congress and you're going to say, I'm not going to pick up a book. I mean, what is wrong with you? So, you know, block out some time to be doing that and be a student. We all could use going from good to great. And I want great for every single one of you. Okay. All right, go get a new listing and a price reduction today and let me know how it went. All right, see you guys. Bye.
Thanks so much, Jeanette.